On August 19th, 1951, Eddie Gaedel becomes the shortest player to ever play in a Major League Baseball game for the St. Louis Browns. At a height of 3 feet 7 inches, he is put into the batter's box, having the smallest strike zone possible, and led to a rule being changed in baseball. Here's the story behind Eddie and all that went into his iconic moment in Major League Baseball. Today on Daily Sports History. Welcome to Daily Sports History. I'm Ethan Reese, your guide to a rapid deep dive into sports history every day. And today's trivia question is, what number did Eddie wear when he took his at-bat for the St. Louis Browns? So to understand why Eddie was even given the opportunity to get a Major League at-bat, you have to understand what a strike zone is. Now, a strike zone is obviously over the plate, so the ball has to travel over the plate. But it's also from a batter's shoulders all the way down to their kneecaps. So every batter has a different strike zone. And the smaller players actually have a smaller strike zone, which means they have a better chance to get walked, so possibly get on base, and requires pitchers to be more accurate. And another reason why Eddie got a shot at this was the owner of the Cleveland Indians. Now, you've heard on a previous episode on Satchel Paige that Bill Veeck loved to promote. He would take Satchel Paige, who was in his 40s before he ever made the majors, to pitch all over, including pitching Satchel Paige when he was 59 in a game versus the Boston Red Sox, making him the oldest player. But in 1951, he had a new idea for the shortest player to ever play in the league. Now, Eddie Gaedel was born in Illinois to immigrants that required him to work very hard. And even though he had a version of dwarfism and is a little person, it didn't mean he didn't actually work. He actually found work during World War II as a riveter because he was able to crawl inside the wings of airplanes and get to those hard-to-reach places that an average-sized person couldn't get to. And he also found some work doing some vaudeville shows or circus acts, which at the time was very common for little people to do, as they would have tall people, short people, big people, overweight people, people with lots of hair, quote, unusual looking people for people to come see. And he would be hired for different events. Mercury Records actually hired him to portray the mascot, Mercury Man, and he would go on to become the logo at the time for the record company. So as he was doing all these little acts, he caught the eye of Bill Veeck, who had an idea to have a short person play in a game because he would have a very small strike zone. So he contacted the booking agency that Eddie worked for, and he signed him to the Browns. But he did this without anyone knowing. He didn't want to cause a stir. And he also knew this was kind of against the rules. It was a gray area of baseball at the time. So on August 19th, 1951, they had a doubleheader against the Detroit Lions. And in between the games, they were celebrating the 50th anniversary of the American League. And they actually had Eddie pop out of a papier-mâché cake to celebrate the event, something very common for performers to do. And when he popped out, Eddie was wearing a jersey that had the number 1/8 on it, a fraction, saying he was a fraction of a person. So in the bottom of the first inning of the second game of the doubleheader, Eddie came out for the first at-bat, pinch hitting for Frank Saucier. And the umpire was a bit confused, and he called the manager of the Browns because he didn't think that this was an actual player. And he actually came out with a copy of Gaedel's contract. Now, we talked about it being a secret. They signed the contract on a Friday and submitted it last minute to the league office. Now, the league office worked Monday through Friday, so if you submitted something that came in last minute on a Friday, it wouldn't get seen till that Monday, so you could get by with some gray area stuff. And that's exactly why his contract was valid for the umpire, but necessarily wasn't valid for Major League Baseball. But the umpire looked at the contract and allowed Eddie to step into the batter's box. Now, Billy had told Eddie not to swing at anything. He wouldn't have to. But it looked like Eddie was really trying to swing. He got into an actual stance and looked like he was, going to swing the bat to chance at hitting the ball. And so he actually took $1 million insurance policy out on Eddie's life, making sure he would be safe, as he was a smaller person and didn't want anything bad to happen. Now, Eddie's strike zone, when he stepped in there, when he crouched down into a stance, was about 1.5 inches high, because he really crouched down really low and would made it almost impossible to throw a strike. And in that game, pitching was Bob Kane. who thought this was all a joke. And the catcher, Bob Swift, actually got down on his knees to try to get low enough to give a target for Kane to actually pitch. And he told him, just pitch it low as much as you can. But Bob Kane didn't have the accuracy, and most people wouldn't, to be able to make that. And on 4 consecutive balls, they were all high, and it was 4 balls, and Eddie got to take his base, becoming the smallest player to ever get on base. And as he took his way to getting to first base, he actually bowed to the crowd 2 times as they were all cheering and excited. And he was replaced by a pitch runner. And there was 18,000 fans in the stadium giving him a standing ovation as he left. Now, Billy hoped, this strategy would work. You got an automatic man on first base in the first inning. Maybe that would go on to score. But sadly, he would get stranded at third, and the Tigers would go on to win the game 6-2. Now, because he was pitched run for by the rules, Eddie couldn't come back in and hit again. So he only got that 1 at-bat. And on Monday, the American League vetoed the contract, saying they made a mockery of the game. And they changed the rules that no one could play a game unless the contract was approved by the commissioner of baseball, which seemed like it should be a rule in place. But as we've talked about before, sports is often reactive and not proactive. And Veeck actually came back and actually kind of threatened that and said that Phil Rizzuto, who was the American MVP, only stood 5'6", and maybe he's just a tall dwarf. Now, this was a silly argument, as 5'6" and 3'7" is very different in size. And Eddie didn't play baseball. This was strictly a ploy or a gimmick, not an actual player. Now, initially, Major League Baseball struck Eddie from the record books, saying it didn't happen, but a year later, he was re-enlisted, so he had an on-base percentage of 1,000, and he earned $100, which is equivalent to about $1,200 today, which is about the price he would get paid, which was about the price of his appearance fee for any event. Now, this wouldn't be the last time that Billy Veeck would call on Eddie, as in 1959, after Billy had acquired the White Sox, he actually had Eddie and 3 other little people dress up as spacemen and invade the park. And as at that time, UFOs and space was all the rage. And in 1961, he would again hire Eddie and several other little people as vendors, as a joke for the complaining fans, saying that the vendors were in the way and they would miss the game. And so this allowed him to have vendors, and yet they not get in the way because they were so short. Now, unfortunately, that same year in 1961, on June 18th, Eddie was at a bowling alley in Chicago, and after he left, he was followed and beaten to death. Now, the coroner said he died of a heart attack, but the family said he had way too many bruises for it to just be a heart attack. So it was never really investigated. It's a sad way to see his life end at just 36 years of age, especially since he was a smaller person and probably couldn't defend himself, even if it was just one person or multiple people. It's a sad way to end, but his legacy does live on. He is one of only 5 Major League players to draw a walk in their only appearance. And his great-grandnephew, Kyle Gaedel, would actually get drafted by the San Diego Padres in 2011 and make it as high as AA in the minor leagues. So baseball was in his blood. And in 1994, Mike Veeck, who was Billy's son, who owned the minor league St. Paul Saints team, had Bob Kane reenact it with the manager's 10-year-old son playing the Eddie role. And because Eddie wasn't a baseball player and wasn't involved in a lot of things, he didn't sign a lot of autographs. And so his autograph, if you are able to find it, sells more than Babe Ruth's autograph, as it is so scarce. I want to thank you for joining us today on Daily Sports History, and I hope you enjoyed this random moment in sports history. And if you like this, please subscribe wherever you're listening. That way you don't miss out on any of our episodes that come out, because we're going to come back tomorrow for more Daily Sports History. And today's trivia question is, what number did Eddie wear when he took his at-bat for the St. Louis Browns? Eddie was wearing a jersey that had the number 1/8 on it, a fraction, saying he was a fraction of a person.